Thank you, Eddie. I appreciate the clapping, but I hope it happens at the end of my talk, not just at the beginning. You know, I got smart with an attorney the other day, and I said, how come you guys are always practicing? You just always practice. You never play a game. And he said, Harlan, if we charged you what we would charge when we play the game, you couldn't afford it. That's why we're practicing. So I shut up, and so my bill would not go up. A little bit about Movement Mortgage. We're headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina area. Actually South Carolina, because just over the line, because they gave us money to move to South Carolina. But Casey Crawford is our CEO, and he started the company in 2008, which was the worst time to start a mortgage company. He had just won the Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Bucks, and kind of wanted to know what to do with the rest of his life. So he Googled how to start a mortgage company. Crazy thing. We did $20 billion last year. And we're a very different mortgage company because we believe in giving back. And so when he started, he said, when I make profits, I'm going to give half of it away every year. I'm just going to give half of it away to schools, to churches, to building community centers in Honduras and other areas of Central America. So far, in the 15 years that we've been in existence, we've given away $330 million. So we're very serious about that. We call ourselves impact lenders, and we encourage other companies to do the same thing. Right now, we're in a category of 1. No one else has pledged 50% of their profit. I was walking down the jetway, and Delta has all these signs as you go down, and I really like Delta. It's a good company, so I'm not making fun of them. But it said, we give away 1% of our profits. And so I took a picture of it and sent it to Casey, and I said, it looks like they're not an impact airline, like we're an impact mortgage company. So it's a really cool company to be a part of. We do mortgages really well, and we do a great job of mortgages, but it really is something that goes beyond that. And if I had another hour, I'd tell you about all of our charitable activities, but that's obviously not what I'm here for. I want you to be very skeptical of things I'm talking about, but I want you to be open-minded, because I'm going to talk about some things that you're going to immediately disagree with, because you're going to say, I don't know about what that guy's talking about. But just hang with me and be a little bit open-minded. It's kind of like my son was talking to our 4-year-old granddaughter, Lauren, the other day, and she said, Daddy, I see that you're getting some gray hair. Where does that come from? So he seized on that as oh, this would be perfect. And he said, well, honey, every time that you do something naughty, and every time you pull your daughter's or your sister's hair and wake up your brother who was just born, I get another gray hair. And so Lauren just kind of thought about that, and she said, how come Grandma's hair is completely white? So sometimes from the mouths of babes. Okay, so things are not always as they appear. And so I want you to know that 20 years ago, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about reverse mortgages, because I don't see very many first-time home buyers in the audience. And we do first-time home buyers, but those are mostly 20-somethings, millennials. And my job, I'm the division leader at Movement, and I just work with people over 62, old people like myself that have gray hair. And the mortgage industry has traditionally been more interested in millennials and in move-up buyers and so on and so forth. So you may wonder, why would a mortgage company be a platinum sponsor of a retirees group? You guys are either finishing up your mortgages or you don't have one. And so that's what I thought about mortgages. So 20 years ago, I went to a seminar. I was living in Wisconsin at the time, where I spent most of my life. And at that point, anytime the subject of reverse mortgages would come up, I immediately just went like this and said, you don't want one of those. They're a ripoff. They screw the old people and hurt their kids. Just stay away from them. They're toxic. And then I was invited to a mortgage seminar in Miami in January. And I'm in Wisconsin. You go to any seminar in Miami in January when it's 25 below zero. So that's what I did. I jumped on the plane and I went down to Miami, and I sat there for 3 days, and it changed my life, because what I thought I knew about reverse mortgages was wrong. So I turned 62 last year in April on the 26th, and on the 27th, on the morning of the 27th, my wife and I were signing our own reverse mortgage, which I had planned for 20 years, ever since I had been at that meeting in Miami. I don't need a reverse mortgage. I didn't think that I would ever get one. I just wanted to get rid of my mortgage and be done sending those checks. And here I have my own personal reverse mortgage. My parents had a reverse mortgage before they passed away. My wife's parents has a reverse mortgage. My sister has one, people in our church, friends, relatives, teachers in school. And I've done over 1,000 of these for clients personally, and now that I just do the training, I've been responsible for thousands more. Just out of curiosity, I'm pretty sure I know, but how many of you have a reverse mortgage? 0. That's what it's always like. Sometimes there's one, and then they put their hand down right away because they don't want to be the one that got a reverse mortgage. So I've saved well. I'm still working. I could afford to make my mortgage payment. Why would I get a reverse mortgage when I don't need one? Now, since all of you did not raise your hand, just give me a quick idea. Why do you not have a reverse mortgage? Pardon? Right, so you don't have a mortgage, but why won't you get a reverse mortgage and get some money back? Don't know enough about it? I'm sorry? Yes, you want to give your house to kids. You know, I sat outside of Public one time and I did a unapproved, down in Florida, the Publix doesn't allow you to do any soliciting in their parking lot. But I just took a clipboard and I started asking everybody that walked out, have you ever heard of a reverse mortgage, and are you going to get one? And of course they automatically said no. And I said, what are you going to do with your house when you die? And they said, well, I'm going to give it to my kids. And then the third question I asked them is, do your kids want it? Do you know that most people have never thought about that question? They just want the money. Everybody, this is the weirdest, strangest disconnect that I've ever run into in my life, is that everybody wants to give a gift to their kids that they want to take back to the store. You wouldn't do that at Christmas time. Why does everybody do that? They insist on giving their house to their kids. So when I asked that question, I said, well, do the kids want it? And sometimes the husband would look at the wife and say, I don't know, do you think Billy would want to move here? Well, maybe Susie would. And they'd walk off talking, go into their car with their bags of groceries. It was weird that nobody really thought about that, because kids want the cash. Because if you have 2 or 3 or 4 kids, which one's going to move in? The oldest one, the youngest one, the one you like the most, the one that's most needy? I mean, which kid's going to get the house? And do they like your house? My kids don't like our green countertops. They complained about that from the time we bought it. They don't want the green countertops. So none of our 4 kids are going to move into our house. So why are we trying so hard to give it to them? So what we decided to do, and what a lot of people have decided to do, is to give it to their kids early and pull out money out of their house and give it to the kids before they die. Because a financial advisor asked me once, a long time ago, Harlan, do you want to give your money away with a warm hand or a cold hand? I mean, that's really something you want to think about. Because do you want to just give it away when you're 90 and they're 60? And you die, and then they get a check at the end, and you don't even get a chance to see what they do with it or have fun. We started doing reverse mortgage vacations several years ago because we knew we were going to do a reverse mortgage in 2022. So we started doing reverse mortgage vacations, and we take the kids on vacation. And the last one we did last year was in Kauai, all 4 sons, all 4 daughter-in-laws, all 5 grandkids. And the memories that come out of that and the fun that we have in those vacations, I just think, what if I would have hung on to all of that money, paid off my house, and then gave all of it to the kids when we're dead? They'd go to Kauai without me. I just didn't go with them. I mean, it's kind of weird that we just hang on to that really tightly. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And I hope that you actually do something about this and that it fits into your retirement plan, because we're talking about pensions, we're talking about insurance, we're talking about all kinds of things today. But this is something that that you really want to think about and do something about, because it is the biggest, with all due respect to some of the insurance and financial people in the back of the room, did you know that we have helped people accumulate more wealth in their homes in this country than any other asset class in the history of the world? There is $12 trillion with a T sitting in your houses, doing absolutely nothing, because you've either paid off your house completely or you almost have it paid off, and you owe $100,000 on a $800,000 house, and you have $700,000 worth of equity. And it seems like, well, that would be great. That's more than enough of what you need, and eventually it'll go to the kids. But what if you did something else with that along the way? Because it is a tremendous amount of wealth, and it's not being used. And so I've got a couple of things here. I've got a cool little ad specialty thing that's a $100 bill, and then I've got a paper one. Which one would you guys like to have? Because we got lots of ad specialties. So I've offered this to a. You want the one on the left? Okay. Is your house paid off? Okay. So you don't get this because you get this, because you've got a whole bunch of equity that is worthless. Now, is that kind of insulting that I just told him that all of the equity in his house is worthless? Notice I didn't say his house was worthless. His house is worth a tremendous amount of money, but the equity in his house is worthless. That's sobering, because that's what I found out 20 years ago, because you can't do anything with it. It looks just like this. I've taken this to a gas station and tried to pay for my gas with it, and they would not take it until I pulled this out or a credit card, because it's worthless. And I showed them a picture of my $1 million house, and they said, "We don't care about your house. You need to pay for the gas. Move along, sir." And so the issue is that most people are in love with equity. They brag about it at a wedding or a party or whatever. I got my house paid off. It's free and clear. Okay. And that's wonderful because you don't have a payment, but what can you do with that money? Give it to your kids when you die. And that's all. That's the only thing that you can do with it. That is it, unless you sell it while you're alive, and then you have the money, but then you got to go find a place to live because you're homeless. And if you don't want to be homeless, you got to find another place either to rent or move in with the kids. By the way, that is the cheap. I want to give you some advice that will save you a ton of money. Sell your house, put it in investments, do whatever you want with it, and go live with your kids. That is the cheapest possible way to finish out your retirement years. Did you say I was nuts? He's not going to do that. Okay, so he's going to hang on to his equity for a while longer. Your kids are in the basement. Yeah, so sometimes the kids are already there. You're already living with your kids. So the issue is, this is what I want you to think about, is everybody has 3 buckets of wealth. And this issue with reverse mortgages has become way more important as the markets got crazy, bonds went down, stocks went down, crap happened with pensions, as you guys know way more about than I do. I read a book a while ago called Who Stole My Pension? Boy, talk about a scary book. I was talking to Eddie about it when I first met him. I mean, it's crazy. So there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. The bright spot is all of our house values went up. And they went up a lot. Can anybody just give me an idea of what you bought your house for and what it's worth now? Just an example. You bought it for $50,000 how long ago? 1985. And how much is it worth now? $500,000. Went up 10 times, easily. And all you had to do is make some payments on a $50,000 scenario. So all of us have built a significant amount of wealth through our house, and house values have not went down like all of the people have talked about. Does anybody know why house values have not went down when the interest rates have doubled? Because there's not enough houses. It comes down to supply and demand. There's 1.5 million realtors in this country, and there's 570,000 listings in the entire country. There's only 570,000 houses for sale. So that's a problem because there's not enough houses, and the millennials want houses, and then we sometimes buy second homes. And I was talking with Pam and her husband last night. I mean, goodness, you guys got 4 houses. You'd help with the inventory problem if you could sell some of those. So the issue is that one of the bright spots of this whole thing is the housing market is still up here. Is there going to be a crash in the future? I personally think there's going to be a crash in 30 years when all of us baby boomers die, because then there'll be too many houses and not enough people to buy them. So be careful about leaving your house to your kids, because there's going to be a whole bunch of kids selling their houses in 20, 30 years. So I'm not making any dire predictions that your house is going to be worth $200,000 in 20 years, but it could happen because of supply and demand. So how does this work together? If we take a look, the simplest way to look at this is with the 3 buckets. Everybody has 3 buckets of wealth. Bucket 1 is your bucket. You worked your butt off to make a lot of money during your lifetime, and then you're trying to get the money out in the form of a pension or in Social Security or whatever. Maybe you're still working part-time, doing things, doing consulting, whatever. So bucket 1 is your bucket. Bucket 2 is the financial planner's bucket. That's your 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, savings accounts, life insurance, annuities, money that you put aside that you didn't need today that you want in the future. Because a lot of people say, money isn't everything. Well, it's reasonably close to oxygen. You kind of need it like every day to buy food and clothes and gas and everything else. And so that's money that you put away so that you've got money for the future when you need it. Well, what about bucket 3? Well, bucket 3 is the bucket that I work in every day. That's home equity. That's this stuff right here. People have given us hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last 40 years. And we don't give them anything back except for equity. And he doesn't even want it back. He wants cash. He wanted this. So we do give cash back also. So people put hundreds of thousands of dollars into something called their home, in the form of a mortgage, in the form of taxes, in the form of improvements, and all of the things that you do to create wealth in your house. And there's nothing wrong with being proud of the fact that you worked hard and you got your house paid off. In fact, my father, when I was 8 years old, I grew up on a farm in central Wisconsin, and he told me about mortgages because we went to a mortgage burning party. Has anybody here ever went to a mortgage burning party? When you ask young people about that, they've never been to one. But us older people have seen a few of them. So I was 8 years old. I went to a mortgage burning party, and I'm going home, and I remember asking my dad, "What's the deal with this mortgage stuff? Why did they burn the thing?" And everybody cheered. And what's this about? Is it kind of a religious thing, or because the next door neighbors were Catholics and we were Protestants, and I thought it had something to do with a Catholic rite or something. But he said, "No, Harlan, this is the deal. A mortgage can, if you get behind on your mortgage and you don't pay it, you can get kicked out of your house and you wouldn't be able to sleep in your bedroom tonight. That will scare the hell out of an 8-year-old kid and brand forever that mortgages are awful and they're evil and they're scary and they're something to get rid of." And that's what we were taught by Depression-era parents, because it was the truth. You could lose your house if you did not make the payments. That's a pretty serious deal. So we've threatened people for years that if you don't make a mortgage payment on the first of the month, we will kick you out of your house. And so as a result, they've given us what? Hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in turn, they've got hundreds of thousands, millions, billions, trillions of dollars worth of equity. And we've just been programmed into doing that. For years and years and years, we just keep putting money into our house, and then we end up with a bunch of equity, and then we plan on giving it to our kids who don't want it, and we'll convert it back to cash. And that's the cycle that happens all over with us not even really thinking about it. So that's what happened at the beginning here. From the time you're 18 to 62, you're making all this money, and you put maybe 5% into savings, and you put money obviously into your company and the pension, and in hopes of getting it back. And now sometimes you got to fight to get it back, which is kind of crazy when you think about it with these big companies and the things that they do. But when you get down here in past 62 years old, well, you're going to take money out of your Social Security. You're going to take money out of your pension because that's what it was planned for. Is anybody here taking any money out of their savings account, their IRAs, 401ks, 403bs? Anybody taking money out? Most of us? Okay. Why are you taking that money out? Why are you not giving that to your kids? I mean, why don't you give that to your kids? Because they want cash anyway, right? So don't spend any more money in any of your savings accounts or your retirement accounts, keep all that in there and give it to your kids. And don't you think that's a good idea?
You have to take it out of 70.
Well, you had to take it out of 72, yes, because there's a rule about that.
You're not there yet, so don't worry.
No, I've got a few years left. I got 10 years before I got to take that out. But yes, then you come mandatory distributions. But why don't you take money out of bucket 3 instead of bucket 2? I mean, you put a whole bunch in, you put hundreds of thousands of dollars in. So that's the question I had to ask when I went to Miami 20 years ago. Well, just a minute. Wouldn't it be more expensive, and wouldn't that screw up my inheritance for my kids, and wouldn't that screw up my cash flow if I took money out of bucket 3 first? So I spend a long time, hours and hours and years, talking to financial planners and researchers across the country about this. Texas Tech University, Boston College for Retirement Research, American College in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, the University of Illinois Financial Planning Department has studied this in depth with hundreds of thousands of Monte Carlo simulations and people that build spreadsheets and everything else. I mean, I talked to a ton of people way smarter than me. And my wife said, that's not hard to find. So she put me in my place when I said that one day. But these people are really smart with numbers. And they said, guess what happens when we run all of these forecasts? If you pull money out of bucket 3 first, like I did at 62 as soon as I could, and left the money in bucket 2 for a longer period of time, or took out some out of bucket 3 and some out of bucket 2, what would happen? And so I started really looking into the numbers because I was planning on paying my house off and having it free and clear and giving it to my kids, just like everybody else, because that's kind of what was explained. And when the numbers come in, when you use bucket 3 first, in conjunction with whatever you're doing with bucket 2 and bucket 1, 3 things will happen. Number 1, you will have more cash flow. Well, obviously, I had a mortgage payment on April 1st of 2022, and on May 1st, my payment was 0. I haven't made a payment since May 1st. Did I spend some equity? Yep. I now make my house payment with equity. But I have more cash in bucket 2. So that's what I found out is that you have more cash flow. And then secondly, my tax bill goes down. And I'll share a little bit more about that because you can actually pay less income tax when you do a reverse mortgage. And thirdly, and most importantly, my overall net worth will go up. And I will end up with a higher net worth, and when I die, my kids will get less equity in bucket 3, but they will get more cash out of bucket 2. Or I will give them more while I'm alive, like that Hawaiian vacation. And so one lady told me once, she said, well, I don't really agree. I don't believe in your philosophy. I said, ma'am, this is not a religion, this is math. You don't have to have any faith, just look at the numbers. But we have an overwhelming feeling, and in this culture, we believe that home equity is incredibly valuable, and we hang on to it like this tight. And we are so concerned about having our houses paid off free and clear, and never, ever putting something against it, because maybe you, like me, were told by Depression-era parents that's a good thing to pay it off. And prior to 1988, you were right, and my dad was right. But after 1988, during President Reagan's term, there was a housing bill that went through and said, hey, we're going to allow seniors to take money out of their houses, and they will have 0 risk in doing so, and they will never have to pay it back, and they will never be upside down. Impossibility. That changed everything. Because now that allows me to take money out of bucket 3, and if I live to be, do you know my mortgage that I signed on April 1st? Does anybody have any idea what the term of a reverse mortgage is? How many years? Lifetime. Goes to 150. So if I live to 150, I'm going to have to pay this thing back. Not very concerned about that. So I've got a 90-year mortgage. Why would everybody not want a 90-year mortgage if it increased their cash flow, decreased their taxes, and increased their net worth? That's why I've got it, not because I need it, but because I want it. And a lot of people say, well, the government will change that. It's too good of a deal. They might in the future, but once I'm in that contract, The government cannot change it. The bank cannot change it. I am guaranteed that I can live in the house for the rest of my life. If I die, my wife can live in the house for the rest of her life, or she can sell it and move. And she will never have a bill beyond the money that she used and the interest that's accrued, ever. And if it goes upside down and I die in a year like 2009, like my uncle did, and he was upside down in his house, he never paid a bill. The $300,000 that my uncle Arvid had in bucket 2, all of that went to his heirs. Bucket 3 that was upside down in 2009, all the money that he took out, he didn't have to pay it back. The house was used to pay that back, but the deficit was paid for by the Federal Housing Administration because there's mortgage insurance on these loans, that it guarantees that the bank will get the money and guarantees that you will never have to pay the bill, nor your heirs, nor your estate, or anything else. And all of the money that you kept in bucket 2 belongs to you, or to your kids, or whoever you passed it on to, the church, or whatever the situation is. So the bottom line is that using bucket 3 as part of your overall plan is a very wise thing to do. I just had a client that called up. Her husband, it was a really sad call. Her husband is going in into a memory care facility, and it's going to cost her $10,000 a month for him to be in a memory care facility. Now, if you have long-term care, insurance, that can pay for it, but most people don't have that. And so she was going to pull all that money out of her IRA. What happens when you pull $120,000 a year out of your IRA to pay for that? Yeah, all of a sudden the taxes go up. The cool thing about pensions and the cool things about bucket 2 is that it's money, but when the money comes out, you have a mortgage on your IRA. You have a mortgage on your pension because the government wants some of that because it's taxable. So the good thing is you have it. The bad thing is the government also owns some of it. I always ask people when they show me an IRA, how much of this is yours and how much of it is theirs? And they say, well, it's all mine. And I said, well, how much is theirs? And theirs is spelled how? The IRS. So we have to give that up on the other side of the equation. So if she starts pulling 100 and then plus her living expenses, 200 grand out of her IRA, first of all, her IRA is not going to last very long. And she's young. She's in her 60s. Her husband is 74. She's like 68. This is a big problem. But she's got an $800,000 paid off house. And we can pay for the long-term care for her husband for approximately 5 years, and without touching bucket 2. And if she does it the other way, she will run out of money much more quickly, and it won't be funny. She'll have to move in with her kids. She will have no choice. She'll have to sell her house to take care of her husband, and she won't have a house, and she won't have any money in bucket 2. So the issue is that there is a reason in every plan to use bucket 3. And some of you may say, well, we're fine. We got long-term care insurance and we got plenty of money and that's not an issue. I've heard from many people we have plenty of money. Do you know what plenty of money is? Can anybody tell me what plenty of money is? There's never enough. I mean, I guess if you were Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, maybe you have plenty of money. Yeah, they're looking for more. So the issue is that to properly use the wealth that you have worked your butt off, because what really irritates you when they start cutting pension benefits? That belongs to you. You worked your butt off to get it. Well, you worked your butt off to pay off your house too. Why can't you have access to some of that equity to be able to use it, whether it's for long-term care, whether it's buying one of our clients bought a boat with the reverse mortgage. Another client bought a motorhome. Another client helped all 3 of their kids buy a house in Washington State because it's too crazy expensive for the kids to afford a house. So they had 3 kids get a house instead of them inheriting one house in 20, 30 years down the road. So I don't know how it would fit in your situation, but I can tell you not using that is as silly as saying we're not going to touch our 401k money. That belongs to our kids. We're going to leave it sit there no matter what. I was talking to a guy in Texas a couple of years ago, and he was a father of one of our loan officers. And the father, or the loan officer said, I want you to talk to my dad because he won't talk to me, and he's mad that I even sell these things, and he thinks that I'm really a bad guy. And I want you to talk to my father. And so we set up a time, and I was in his conference room, and this chicken loan officer, as soon as we sat down, he said, I got to make a couple of calls. I'll be right back. And I'm left alone with his dad. And his dad said, you know, Mr. Accola, you should be ashamed of yourself. That's how the conversation started out. And I said, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. Why do you think so? He said, because you are robbing from the children and the grandchildren of this great nation. And if we can't get rid of people like you, pretty soon there won't be any inheritances out there. And I said, wow, I didn't realize that you felt that way. But let me ask you a question. Do you have, how do you live? You're not working anymore, right? And he said, no. He said, I retired with J.C. Penney, and hopefully I'll keep getting my pension. And I've got some money coming in Social Security. And I saved. I got money in IRAs, and I'm doing pretty well. I got a rental property, and so I've got money coming from there. And I said, so if you go on vacation or do something unusual like buy a new car or whatever, where do you get your money? And he said, well, I get it out of my IRA usually, if I don't have enough in my checkbook from my pension and my Social Security. And I said, so you spend the money out of your IRA? And he said, well, of course. He said, that's what it's for. I said, you know, you should be ashamed of yourself because you are spending your grandchildren's money. And he shoved back from the conference table. I thought, I am in Texas. I hope he doesn't have a gun. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. And he said, he didn't pull out a gun. He just said, you know, I never thought about it that way. And I said, it doesn't make sense for you to save all of your money and not spend it any more than it makes sense to save all of your equity and not use it. Because one thing for sure, you cannot take your house with you. You cannot take your house with you. The pharaohs tried that in Egypt, and you know, all the stuff is there. They took all their food and jewels and everything else, and now it's a traveling museum. You can't take it with you. So what are you going to do with your wealth? You need a certain amount of money to live. But when you're doing pension planning and you're doing insurance planning and you're doing planning for your investments, why don't you plan on what you're going to do with bucket 3? Because otherwise it's going to sit there and you're going to give it to your kids and they're going to sell it after you pass away. And maybe they'll get a lot out of it, and maybe they won't, and maybe they'll need it, and maybe it's something that they need worse now, like the family in Washington that helped all 3 of their kids purchase a home. So the issue is in the time that we have left, got about 10 minutes. I want you guys to tell me or ask me what some of the questions are, because I told you to have an open mind, but I also told you to be skeptical. So, like, I've been told that I should be ashamed of myself, so I've got a very thick skin. You're not going to hurt my feelings. What do you think about what I just talked about?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If you die and the house, say the house is 500,000.
Hold on.
Hold on, we got a mic coming.
Hold on.
Just hold on one second.
A microphone is coming around, folks. It's coming right to you. Thank you.
Okay, is it on? Yeah, it's on, okay. If I die, say you die, I die, and let's say I've only spent down half, it's only taken out half of the equity.
Yes.
Doesn't my children have the responsibility to pay that thing back?
Well, the kids don't have a responsibility to pay it back. I'm going to just jump ahead to, I'm not going to go through all these slides, obviously. I don't expect anybody to see this slide because you'd have to have very good glasses. But this is my personal reverse mortgage. My house is worth $980,000 when I did the loan, and I have a $444,000 loan balance. So, and my wife is 60, so it goes according to age 60 because she's underage. Anybody under 62 is underage in our book. When I tell people I'm married, my wife is underage, this is weird, but she's under 62. So it goes according to the 60. So when I turn 75, if I die at 75, I will owe, assuming I never made a payment, I will owe $863,000. My house theoretically will be worth $1.7 million. So at that point, the kids would sell the house, pay off the mortgage, and walk away with the $1 million difference. if that's what the home is worth and if that's what the balance is, and I die at 75, using that example. So whatever's left, the kids can either refinance it into their name, or if they do want the house, which is rare, or they just sell the house and take the difference and split it up, along with the life insurance and all the stuff that I have in bucket two. If I go to age 100, I'll owe 2.6 million. My house will be worth 4.7 million based on a 4% inflation rate, which could be high, could be low. But if my house is worth 4.7 million and I owe 2.6 million, well, that's $2 million that will go to my kids. But let's say the house isn't worth 4.7 million and it's only worth $1 million, never went up at all. The kids walk away and I was able to live in a house for free for 40 years. That's a pretty good deal, and I got $444,000.
Well, let me give you an example. I had a friend that, an old aunt. She lived down in New Jersey. She got us a mortgage, okay? She took the money and she added onto the house, okay? But then she didn't maintain the house. She died, okay? They couldn't sell the house. So the heirs ended up having to, basically take the responsibility of the debt.
The heirs never, if it's an FHA reverse mortgage, I don't know if that was, but that's the only thing that we do is we only have non-recourse loans. The heirs are never responsible. I'm not responsible for this mortgage that I took out. My house is responsible for it. So I signed that I'm going to give up some of my equity in exchange for the loan. So legally, I am not responsible for that loan. My wife's not responsible for the loan. Certainly my kids are not, nor is my estate. The only responsibility for the loan is based on equity. And so I'm giving up equity in exchange for cash. So I'm trading equity for cash. That's all I'm doing. And then when that equity is gone, FHA comes in and pays the difference. They're not responsible for that debt. They're responsible for when they sell the house, they got to give that money back that she owed. But they're not responsible for the debt. And if they paid the debt, that is foolish on their part, or they had bad representation, or they didn't have the correct information, because they do not owe it. Never. Great question.
Harlan,
Yes.
can I hop in here? I'm at the back.
Yes.
We have a question from Connie, who's watching virtually.
Yes.
She says, how many years of equity should a person have before they do a reverse loan? I don't have much at the moment since I sold my other home and purchased a smaller a year and a half ago.
Yes. So you have to you get between 40 to 70% of the value of your house, depending on your age. You don't get 100%. Somebody said, why can't I get 100%? Well, because we're not buying your house. You own the house. We're just giving you a portion of what you have, not all of it. And so if you got $1 million house, we give you between $400,000 and $700,000. The younger you are, the less money you get. The older you are, the more money you get. If you're 90, you get 75%, because obviously you don't have as much time left, theoretically. Question?
Harlan, I just have a real life question, something that I've actually lived through and probably didn't handle poorly, but what happens if one of the owners in a reverse mortgage situation becomes either terminally ill or has something like Alzheimer's? How do you work out the sale process of the home when one person's going to need permanent care?
Yeah, so we run into that a lot. And sometimes, like if I go into care and my wife wants to stay in the house, which is most likely because we live close to 4 of our children, so she'll probably want to stay in the house in the Minneapolis area where we live. And so what will happen is the house does not have to be sold because she wants to stay in the house. So the house is never required to be sold until both people die, not one. And that is a very important thing to understand. We do not kick widows out of houses. Now, there was a time when widows, or widowers, we handle either gender. We don't kick out men, we don't kick out women. But usually it's the woman that's left, so that's why we always refer to it as widows. The issue is that there were some stupid men who got reverse mortgages and married younger wives and didn't tell them about it. And then when they died, the wife got kicked out of the house because she was not part of the contract, she was not on the deed, she was not part of the mortgage. And that gave us a really bad name. Because everybody said, look at these horrible reverse mortgages. And Dave Ramsey got on the radio and he said, these things are awful. You know, the reverse mortgage industry is filthy, to quote him. They're kicking widows out on the street. Well, it was the fault of the stupid man who did not put his wife on title. It wasn't the fault of the reverse mortgage. I wrote a chapter in my book. If you want a copy of my book, let me know. Give me your address or whatever, and I'll make. In fact, you can go to our little QR code that I've got. I'll go ahead on that. And one of my books, one of the chapters in my book is Drug, Sex, and Reverse Mortgages. It's the most read chapter. Drugs can be good and they can save your life, or they can kill you with an overdose. Sex, I guess it can be good, it can be evil. It can kill you, yeah, heart attack. You hear about that a lot. And then reverse mortgages can be good or bad too. If you marry a younger wife and you don't tell her about the reverse mortgage, well, she can get kicked out of the house. That's bad. It's used incorrectly. So just because something is used incorrectly doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, use it correctly. Pensions are a very good thing. If companies are not fair about them, they can be a bad thing, and it can be something you have to fight for. So that's really the situation. So when it comes down to care, the other thing is, I don't want to get too deep into this, but all of the money that is in the house, if we give you a line of credit of $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, that's all exempt. It's not counted in at all. And 100% of the money that comes out of the reverse mortgage is tax-free. There's all kinds of very sophisticated estate planning that you should be doing with your home instead of just leaving it sit there. It's foolish to just leave it sit there and do nothing with it and not make any plans with it when there's a bunch of things that you could do. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I guess where the confusion came in originally on some of these is the fact that there's a percentage of the value of the house that's given. So we have had people, perhaps they did it incorrectly with the person they shouldn't have, but who basically said, my house was worth this much, I only got this much, and they started using the money up and using the money up, and now they're in their late 70s or 80s saying, there's no money left. Now, if that's true or not, we don't know. We're certainly not.
Well, it is true. Think about it this way. If you have a $400,000 IRA and you spend the whole $400,000, how much do you have left? None. Okay, so if we give you $400,000 worth of equity and you spend it all on going to a casino in the first 3 years, there's none left. So you can, however, that doesn't mean the mortgage ends. It just means we don't give you any more money.
Okay.
So you didn't get kicked out. It didn't end the deal.
Well, that was the whole thing, because she led us to believe, this person, that she would get kicked out, and
Yeah.
you were saying no. Okay,
No,
good.
there were people that were upside down by hundreds of thousands of dollars on their houses and condos in 2009, and nobody got kicked out.
Okay, one other question.
Yes.
If you had a person that had a house, there's a lot of us that may be widowed in a home, and thinking of maybe going to senior citizen, housing, et cetera, because we can't afford the house. Would this be a good way of keeping our house and having some money for aids and things like that?
Yeah, you know, there's been a ton of studies done on that, and people that age in place in the house that they want to be in are better off financially when using a reverse mortgage. They're better off emotionally, which is a really big deal. How many people, I've talked to people that moved into senior housing, and one guy said, I want to get out of here. I'm eating dinner every night with the same people, and I don't even like them all. And the food isn't that great either. And we get the same stuff every Thursday or whatever. So, you know, we bought the nicest house in Minneapolis for our last quarter. We kind of gradually moved up to houses. And so why do people have to downsize and move into an apartment? If they want to, that's fine. But why do they have to get a crummy house for their last, I mean, my great aunt retired in a little tin can in Arizona in a trailer park with 3 air conditioners hanging out. When I went down there when I was in my 20s, I thought, if this is what retirement looks like, I don't want to retire. And, you know, that was her retirement because that's all that she could afford. So the issue is where do you want to age? And when you look at it from an emotional perspective, from a psychological perspective, and from a financial perspective, usually the best place you can retire is that house where you've got family, friends close, where you've got the medical things taken care of. You don't have a lot of work that needs to be done in the house. So you want to take a look at where is my last house. But if you end up in a house, and what I want to make sure that you're aware of, if you end up in the wrong house and you want to move, we didn't nail your feet to the floor. This is not, you don't get any, you don't have to get a prepayment penalty. Sell your house and move to the next one. I've done 4 reverse mortgages for one client because they kept following their kids. And then the kids would move to the next city and the next city and the next city, and we kept doing a reverse mortgage at every, house that they bought. So be careful, following your kids, because sometimes they move away from you. By the 3rd time, I said, "Are you sure your kids want you to move by you this time?" Because they keep moving. So you don't have to be in that same house for the rest of your life, because look at my equity. My equity was actually growing because I've only got $400,000 and my house is now worth $1.2 million. So as that continues to grow, I have more equity. I can use that equity. I have some cash and I have some equity. And so I can use that equity to do whatever I want with on the next house. So you can use that to buy the next house and downsize from a 2-bedroom or a 2-story into a 1-story, live where you want to live. There's all kinds of people that are living in a house they really don't want to be in. Yes?
Terry B., who is also watching virtually, would like to know, what if you don't have kids or grandchildren?
Well, there's always got to be a plan as to what happens with the house. So maybe you're going to give it to the church, maybe you're going to give it to the Humane Society, whatever the situation is. So we do not control, we just follow whatever the will says or whatever the trust says. We don't control where that house goes. We just call up whoever the responsible party is and say your mom and dad died, or the person that in this case there is no kids. We're going to call up whoever the administrator is and say there's a bill due within a year. We don't show up at the funeral home and ask for the money. You've got a year to take care of things. So we go to the administrator of the will or the executor, whoever it is, or the trustee, and say, hey, there's something that's got to be settled in the next year. What are you going to do with the house? You going to sell it? Are you going to refinance it? What are you going to do with the house? And so if it doesn't go to the children, we encourage every one of our clients, please get a will, please get a trust, please put this in order, because we're not going to decide where this goes. We don't own your house. See, we never take possession of the house. Everybody thinks that we own the house. We have no interest in owning your house. Then we got to plow the snow or we got to cut the grass. We have no interest. We're lenders. We're not landlords. There's a very distinct difference between lenders and landlords. Lenders give you money and take it back with interest. Landlords own the house and charge you rent. A reverse mortgage is a lender issue, not a landlord issue. So we're not in charge of your house. Now, if your kids don't do anything about it, we will definitely do a foreclosure if the kids don't get the house sold and do something within a year. We have to by law because FHA makes us do that. But the loan is done. Both mom and dad are gone. And so now that's the time to take care of it. Yes, sir. He's got the mic right there.
I'm just wondering how that works with like lawsuits. Suppose you had a blockchain thing, you ripped off $10 million, $1 billion, whatever, and they come after your house.
Yeah, that's a great question. Do you know that there's a lot of wealthy people that do a reverse mortgage specifically because they want to protect their asset, of their most valuable asset, especially if they're in a state that doesn't protect the homestead. So if you went up to the Hennepin County records for my house, you saw my mortgage balance is only $444,000. Do you know what it says on the Hennepin County records of how much I owe? $1.5 million. I don't owe $1.5 million. I only owe $440,000. But I could owe $1.5 million if I live to be 87. So they file a lien for $1.5 million. My house is worth less than that. How many people are going to put a lien against my house? How does that work with Medicaid? Talk to the attorneys that are here. That is a lien, a first lien and a second lien from Movement Mortgage and from FHA that completely blankets the house and covers it up to keep creditors at bay or to keep medical expenses at bay. Works fantastically with the lady that has what if she runs out of money and taking care of her husband and she wants to qualify for Medicaid if he lives 10 years or whatever. That protects the house because that reverse mortgage is put on. We can't do it after the Medicaid lien goes on. After a creditor comes after you, we can't do anything about it then. But once we put that lien on, that placeholder is there that guarantees that anybody else is in third position behind us and Federal Housing Administration. So for those of you that say, I got plenty of money, I'm wealthy, I don't think I'd ever use the reverse mortgage, take a look at that aspect, which is what I want you to think about. I told you in the beginning, I want you to be open-minded, and I want you to take action on this to see if it could make your retirement better, if it can make your inheritance better, if it can save you money in taxes. I will save $200,000 in taxes out of money taking out of my IRA because I have a reverse mortgage. I can fill you in more on those details. Everybody in here is different. Some of you will want to save taxes. Some of you will want to help your kids. Some of you will just want to have a little bit of extra money. Some of you will want to take some uncertainty out of things, that you have a money sitting in your living room that you can just draw on tax-free whenever you want. But I encourage you to take a look at how does this affect you personally. And we do that for free. We do, I'll pass out my contact info. And I'm not personally a loan officer, but one of our loan officers who work in all 50 states will simply give you a call. They will not hassle you. They'll just say, based on your information, this is what would be available, and here's some ideas of what you could do with it. And if you say, well, that's fine, that's interesting, but I don't want to do anything, that's fine. We don't want to do a reverse mortgage for people that don't understand it or don't want to do it for whatever reason. But if it makes sense and it can save you $100,000 in taxes, or can help you from a healthcare situation, or can help supplement your income, or maybe you want to buy an airplane. We talked at dinner last night. I'm a pilot, and I thought maybe Pam says, yeah, I'd like to buy an airplane for my husband for birthday. Oh, it was a surprise. I'm sorry, I screwed up the surprise. So the issue is why don't you just take a look at it? It's not going to hurt you to do it. We don't charge a consultation fee to run through it, and just say, how would this affect me? I see no reason. I don't need it right now. Do you know that my dad told me, and this is kind of a sad situation, but I'm so thankful that I was able to help my parents. My dad was a World War II vet, Patton's Third Army, going up through Europe, ending up in Berlin just a week after Hitler had committed suicide. And I was always going to go back to Europe with Dad and retrace his steps. And Dad had a stroke, and then we couldn't go back. And my son just at Christmas time said, Dad, you never got to take your dad back, but I've read all of Mom's, all the love letters that he wrote to Grandma, and I know where he was basically, and I'm going to take you back to Europe, and we're going to go in September, and we're going to retrace Dad's steps. I started bawling, it's pretty cool. But we were going to do that with my dad, but he was a prime caregiver for Mom, who had Alzheimer's. And then he had a stroke, and all of a sudden there was a lot of care for both of them. We didn't pull money out of his IRA. He didn't have a pension. He was a small-time Wisconsin farmer, but had quite a bit of money in the IRA, which would have been heavily taxed. And he had the reverse mortgage that I had set up for him years before. And he told me when he set it up, he said, Harlan, we haven't had a mortgage on this place for 30 years. I see no reason why we should be doing this. This is crazy. And I said, Dad, just trust me. And he said, okay, it's probably going to screw things up for you and the other boys. But it didn't, because at that moment we had plenty of money. We had over $300,000 sitting in a line of credit that had been going up all of those years from the reverse mortgage. And that is what got him and Mom through their last 2.5 years before they passed. So this is something that's very personal to me, and Dad never needed it until he needed it. And it just makes sense to buy umbrellas when it's not raining. And that's what I encourage you to take a look at. If you don't have a need today, life is very uncertain. The only thing certain about the future is that it's uncertain. And maybe you have a need right now that we can help you with, save you a bunch of money in taxes on a Roth conversion, or help you with getting money out of your IRA tax-free, or keeping a life insurance policy in place. I don't know. Maybe there's an immediate need, but if there's not an immediate need, make sure that you have some cash in your living room and not just a bunch of equity, because he wanted some cash. So we'll trade you some of your equity for cash. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the... I'm sorry.
We're all told that each spouse has a $250,000 tax deduction for your home. Is that still in place?
It is $500,000 for a couple, yes.
Okay, so when you have a situation of a home that's owned, totally paid off, and one of the spouses dies, 5 years later, 8 years later, you decide to sell the house. And in the example of your situation, where it was $1 million house, then you would only have the one $250,000 deduction. Is that correct? So you would have to pay tax. If you sell it before the final parent dies, you'd have to pay tax on that, I would assume.
Not necessarily. Now think about that. You saw my balance, and without getting into the weeds on taxes, and I'm not a CPA, but I spent a lot of time with Dr. Barry Sachs, who's a tax attorney in California that I've done a lot of work with, and wrote some of our white papers. I wrote a white paper with his help specifically on the deductibility of reverse mortgage taxation and reverse mortgage interest. I will have, if I live to be 75 and you saw that $1 million that I would owe, I would have a $500,000 deduction to offset the gain on the house.
So it's a situation of what you want to do to avoid, we're selling a house right now of a 90-year-old with, who no longer wants to live there,
Yep.
doesn't, and isn't capable. So
If they would have got a
those are the
reverse
implications
mortgage,
we're looking at now.
if they would have got a reverse mortgage 20, 25 years ago, they could virtually eliminate all of their taxes and they would have had the cash besides. Hindsight's 20/20, as my dad always said, but we're giving you a little bit of a view into the future. And I read a book once called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and one of them is begin with the end in mind. So if you begin with the end in mind, where you're at right now in that situation, there's going to be a significant amount of taxation. This happens all over California. We deal with somebody in California almost every day that bought a house for $400,000 and it's worth $2-3 million. And now they're just paying a boatload. I mean, you guys think things are bad in New York? Oh my goodness, take a look at the taxes in California. Don't move there. It's crazy. So there's a lot of ways that a reverse mortgage, because a lot of people say, I'm wealthy, I don't need a reverse mortgage. You don't need one, but you want one because if you're wealthy, you got to pay a lot of taxes. And so the more taxes you pay, the more you're going to want a reverse mortgage. I specifically, not that I'm super wealthy, but I specifically did my reverse mortgage to save over $200,000 in taxes, not defer them, save them. And that is a really big deal. And now people say, oh, reverse mortgages are expensive. My closing costs were $30,000. Who cares if I save $200,000 in taxes? I'd rather pay closing costs than pay taxes, because it seems the government kind of wastes that money. But maybe, I've run into a few people that feel that they'd like to give more money to the government because they need it, but very few. Yes.
So if you were to take out a reverse mortgage at the age of 62, and your house skyrockets in value, could you refinance that at 72?
Oh, thank you. Yes. What happened, we've been doing a lot of refinancing the last 3 years because people had houses that we did the reverse mortgage originally and it was worth $400,000 and other houses were worth $650,000. And we did a ton of refinances and gave them more money. If the house goes down in value, you never want to refinance because you set it at the high water mark. But if the house goes up in value, you want to refinance and get more money out. Thank you for that.
And that could work very well for a couple that has a very disparate age difference.
Absolutely. Right. Yes. Yes. If you're doing, like we just did one for a 65-year-old and a 55-year-old, he's got a 55-year-old wife. And there's a very good chance that they'll be refinancing in the future, probably 5 years, 10 years down the road. So this is like buying a put. It's a guaranteeing a future value of the house. And so and if it goes up, great, you can do it again. If it goes down, you're covered. You're not going to lose anything. Okay, did I get all the questions? Thank you for the time. Hey, I did get claps at the end. That's a good thing. All right. So if you just want to look into this, hit the QR code. I'll make sure that I drop off our little flyer with my contact information, and realize that if you talk to me, I'm not licensed anymore. I used to be licensed as a loan originator, and now I just teach since I don't need to keep up on all the licensing stuff. So I can't sell you anything. So feel free to talk to me in a very non-threatening situation. Have a meeting with your kids, your attorney, your financial advisor, whoever, because it's fun putting these things together. And I've had a lot of people say, man, I thought those things were the devil, and it turns out that that's not the case at all, and it changes lives dramatically. And we're into changing lives for the better, and we'd love to change a few lives in here. Thanks for the opportunity.